All right, so we're just gonna wait a minute while people file in. And I think we have over 100 registrants, which we're really excited about. So yeah, we'll just give it a minute for people to join. Okay, so we will be getting started. So hello, everybody. I am Katie Sattler, and I am a student at UBC. Ellen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sorry about that, just a little bit of a Wi-Fi glitch. All right, well, I'm Ellen, a grade 11 student at Dr. E.P. Scarlett.
And I'm Sandeep, a grade 12 student at Western Canada High School. We'll be your moderators for the webinar this evening.
So before we get started and before we get to know this amazing panelist, I just want to say a really sincere thank you to our sponsors, SAIT, MRU, Blackline Safety, and Inception U. So MRU and SAIT are both amazing academic institutions in Calgary, Alberta. Blackline Safety is a Calgary-based technology company focused on making companies run a safer and more efficient workplace. And Inception U is a learning institution that offers both virtual and in-person programs where you can develop technical skills for your future.
We have 4 very special panelists speaking today, all in various health science and medical careers. We have Peter, Blair, Gurjit, and Jacqui joining us today.
Yeah, so we're going to begin the webinar by hearing a little bit about the panelists' experiences and perspectives. And then after some introductions, we're going to move on to some of the great questions you all submitted when you signed up for the webinar. And you submitted quite a few questions, so we'll try our best to get through all of them. But if you think of any additional questions, feel free to just pop those into the Q&A function, and hopefully panelists will be able to respond to those throughout the webinar. I also just wanted to let everybody know that closed captioning is also available if that's something you're interested in. So first, we're going to ask our panelists a few questions we've prepared so we can get to know them a little bit better. And we're going to go in order. So Peter, Blair, Gurjit, and then Jacqui. So first, Peter, what post-secondary education have you received? What has your career path been since you graduated post-secondary? And what do you like most about your current job?
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. So my name again is Peter Jamieson. I'm a physician in Calgary. I went to Henry Wisewood High School in Calgary and then on to the University of Calgary, where I was a biochemistry major. After that, I went to medical school in Calgary and then did my residency at the Foothills Hospital. So I haven't made it very far. I'm pretty much exactly where I started. But I have been practicing medicine now for around 25 years. And what I love most about my job is just the complexity and variety that every day brings. And as my career has advanced, I've had the chance to take on various roles in the healthcare system and with patients. And so, yeah, so I'm really glad to be where I am.
All right, thank you, Peter. So next we'll pass it to Blair. I'll just repeat the questions for you. What post-secondary education have you received? What has your career path been since you graduated? And what do you like most about your job?
Great question. So I went to, there's actually a high school in Montreal called Riverdale High School. I went to Riverdale High School. There was no Miss Grundy, no Mr. Weatherby, but came out here, and I had always wanted to be a paramedic. And so I went to SAIT, 2 years at SAIT. This was back in the 80s, in which probably most of you were not yet alive. And yeah, so I worked as a firefighter and a paramedic for about 20 years. And I've been at SAIT since about 1999 and loved it. And I teach now in the patient simulation lab for the respiratory therapy and paramedic programs. And patient simulation is kind of like flight simulation, except for medical practitioners. So we basically have these really amazing realistic mannequins that blink and breathe and have pulses. And I mess with their physiology, and the students try and treat them. And then we talk about what went well and what didn't. And that last thing I described is the most fun thing about my job. It's really a lot of fun teaching in that milieu.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. So next we'll go to Gurjit.
All right. Hi, guys. My name is Gurjit. I'm a nurse. So my career path, I went to a high school just in Calgary here. Figured out I wanted to do nursing within, I think it was in grade 11 when I really enjoyed biology. And then I did apply to the Mount Royal program, which is a 4-year nursing program down here in Calgary. So I finished my degree there. It's been about 2 years since I've been practicing as a nurse. I was an undergraduate nurse with influenza rapid response program for about 2 years as I was in my nursing degree. And then afterwards, I work on a acute care unit at the PLC here at the Peter Lougheed. And then I also work with the rapid response team COVID response team for about 2 years when COVID came out, working through COVID vaccines, doing testing, going to outreach locations with outbreaks and whatnot. And so that's kind of been my career path. I like to say my favorite part about nursing would probably be the teams. It can be a lot at times, but working with a lot of different individuals, young and old, all the different types of job choices you have and stuff will probably have to be my favorite part of that.
Definitely. And lastly, we'll have Jacqui answer those same 3 questions.
Hi, my name's Jacqui Brusset, and I went to school in Calgary at Western Canada High School. And I did my undergraduate degree at UBC, and then I did chiropractic school in Portland, Oregon. I guess I got into chiropractic partly because I had a bad back injury when I was a competitive gymnast. And after seeking a lot of different treatment, the chiropractic really helped me. So that kind of, I guess, put the idea into my head. And then when I went to UBC, I was in the science program, but I ended up switching into the kinesiology program because I realized I was passionate about anatomy and physiology and the sports med courses that they had. And while I was at UBC, I was an athletic trainer for the UBC rugby team, which was a great way to get a lot of experience working in the sports medicine environment. And when I finished chiropractic school, I spent 1 year working in White Rock as an associate in a clinic and gaining experience. And then my husband and I bought practice in Whistler, BC. So we've been in Whistler for 25 years now, and we love it. And probably the best part we love is getting to meet people from all over the world, and hopefully help them improve their vacation when they often hurt their backs or something limits them from skiing or doing what they want to do. So it's always great to be able to help someone get someone back out there doing the sport they want to do.
Thank you all. Those were very interesting introductions. So now we're going to move on to some of the great student questions that you all submitted. And so I'll pass it on to Katie.
Yeah, so like Ellen said, we're going to move on to the student questions. And I just want to remind anybody, if you kind of do come up with any questions as we're going through this, you can feel free to ask any follow-up questions using the Q&A feature. So we'll start out with a question that a student asked for Peter. And the student was wondering what courses or programs are best to take for a career path towards becoming a doctor. Yeah, so I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Peter, but yeah.
Sure. So thanks. Great question. I think most people probably intuitively realize that for many health sciences, obviously a background in basic life sciences is really helpful. So chemistry, biology, physics, and other associated courses. And those are a great foundation. But that's actually not how I would answer the question. What I would answer the question by saying is, you're probably best advised to do some of those courses, but really follow the things that you're most interested in. So I went to medical school in Calgary, where they have a slightly broader policy around admissions. And I went to school with engineers, with somebody with a music degree, with a couple of nurses, with others. And on my way out of the lecture theater on the first day, my friend turned to me and said to me, "What's an enzyme again?" So he's now a surgeon in Northwest Territories in Kelowna. He's brilliantly successful, totally clever guy. But when we started, we didn't all start from exactly the same point, and that's actually okay. We need lots of different types of physicians, just like we need lots of different types of nurses and chiropractors. And, so do the things that interest you, because you may not in the end turn out to do a career in medicine, and that's great too. You may want to do other things. So some of the basics, but don't be too narrow.
Yeah, I really like that answer. I know somebody who wants to go to medical school and is currently doing an art history degree. So I think it's very interesting to kind of see that there's so many different ways you can kind of get there. So that's super interesting. The next question, sorry, is along kind of the same lines. It's for Blair and a student. I know that you have a health science degree, Blair. So a student asks, what can you pursue with a health science degree?
So my health science degree, I kind of went into that the wrong way around, I guess, is I got my degree long after I was a paramedic. And the idea was simply to sort of broaden my horizons a little bit. And yeah, so in my career, what that degree means, and then I got a master's after that. But in my career, what that means is it opened things up a little bit. And that's something I would urge anyone to consider in considering their career is where is when you're considering any career, where can you go with that geographically? And, as your interests widen out. So, as a physician, I would say probably you could go almost anywhere in the world. As a nurse, you could go almost anywhere in the world geographically, something you may want to consider. Or, if you think, maybe eventually I want to teach, or maybe eventually I want to, yeah. So just something to consider in terms of, and I would definitely echo what Peter said in terms of do things that really interest you. That's really important, I think. And you can almost always find a career in doing that. But keep in mind, where do you want to go? Make yourself versatile.
Thank you. That's a really, really insightful response. The next question is for Gurjit. And somebody asked, do you go to nursing school after you have a bachelor degree? Or is nursing school kind of incorporated in the curriculum?
That's a great question. I can totally see that. When I was a student, I was like, wait, what's nursing school? And why is there a bachelor's degree? And it always sounds confusing. But to put it in simple terms, a bachelor's degree in nursing is basically just a 4-year program. It's just very concise. It's very narrow. It's like you don't really get that many options. You're on a pretty strict schedule. And so basically when people say nursing school, they're just kind of talking about the bachelor's degree because you're put in such a close-knit group. So they basically just kind of call it nursing school, and it is your bachelor's degree.
And just to ask a follow-up question, is it like a separate degree to become a nurse practitioner, or how does that work?
That's also a great question. I don't know if I have all the answers to that one. So if anybody else on the panelist has any, especially the doctors, but to be a nurse practitioner, I do believe, I do know you have to have more schooling. You do have to have hours of nursing experience as well. You do have to, I believe you have to get qualified in some other certain way. Once you do a bachelor's degree, which is just the 4-year program of nursing, that just gives you the title of an RN. And if you want to do anything more than that to pursue an NP career, I believe you do have to go back to school and at least get your master's. And there may be something else on there. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. I feel like it's kind of very confusing with the different like school paths and stuff. So I'm sure that's really helpful to know.
I'm gonna add one. That's because a nurse practitioner's scope of practice is more than a nurse and registered nurse. So they fall under a different union and a different what do they call it, like a body. So they're different things. So they do have to go get some other certification.
Okay, yeah, that's really good to know. Thank you so much. The next question is for Jacqui, and someone wanted to know, how does a chiropractor's work differ from a physiotherapist or an athletic therapist?
That's an interesting question, because as far as the work is concerned, especially up here in Whistler, there's a lot of similarities in what we do. So, which is great because a lot of us all work together as well. And so we often treat the same injuries and are dealing with the same issues, especially as physiotherapists, probably more so than athletic trainers. But with physiotherapists, it's great because we can collaborate and send people back and forth, and we maybe approach things sometimes differently, but in general are actually doing a lot of things very similarly. As far as like deciding which career path you want to go to, that an athletic trainer doesn't have as much education as a physiotherapist and a chiropractor. As far as I know, I don't know if it's changed now, but when I was an athletic trainer, that was the case. But I think, because they are so similar, the best thing would be to go and visit different offices and see. That's actually how my husband, who's also a chiropractor, he was going into physiotherapy program, and he started working for a chiropractor for a summer, and then he decided to switch into chiropractic. So I think they're so similar, it's best to just go and visit a bunch of different offices and kind of get a idea of what suits your style and what you want to do. The education is also a little bit different, I think, too.
I definitely agree with your point that it's kind of hard to get a feel for things if you don't actually just experience them. So that's a really good answer.
And also, one more thing to add, like they've said, a lot of there's different areas you can go into. So a lot of physiotherapists, I think, sometimes go into respiratory physiotherapy, and so there's so many different ranges of what you can do as well.
Okay, yeah, that's really good to know. Thank you so much. The next question, we'll put it to both Blair and Peter. And a student was wondering, what made you decide or realize that medicine, or the field of maybe paramedics, in your case, Blair, what made you realize that that was right for you? So maybe we'll go to Peter first and then Blair.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen or Katie. So perhaps like many grade 12, grade 11, grade 12 students, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. And I did biochemistry because I found it interesting. That might sound a little nerdy, but I did. And my friends who were in biochemistry with me all wanted to apply for medicine. So I did it for peer pressure reasons. It's not the greatest answer in the world, but it's the honest one. But then once I got into it, then my interest was just totally captured because I just found it so interesting. So as with many things, it's what your friends and your peers are into. But once I got into the community of medicine and started to experience what it was actually like, then I really loved it. So Blair probably has a better answer than me. So go to him.
I doubt I have a better answer, but I probably, like many people, I was attracted to the career I was in because I saw a show about it. When I was growing up, there was a show called Emergency that was on that I loved. I would caution you that I think most people on here would say that any show about probably any career, but certainly anything in medicine, is probably not very realistic at all. And so as a paramedic, and I don't want to speak for anybody else, but you wind up dealing with much more mundane things that are still very concerning to your patients than is shown on TV. And I always remember talking to a friend of mine who was an X-ray technician, who at one point said to me, "I'm so tired of dealing with these old people and drunks. I'm going to become a paramedic." And I said, who do you think is bringing you all the old people and drunks? So, you know, yeah, you may have some very exciting days, but you also have days when you're sitting with someone who is, you know, 60 years older than you, who's got a bad cough and is a little scared and just wants to, yeah. So that's a bit bigger part of my career, at least, than the shows would say. I don't know if I answered that question completely.
No, that's a really good answer, and definitely a very good point. I know lots of people want to become doctors because of, I know the show Grey's Anatomy is very kind of popular for that. So that's a really, really good point. Thank you so much. And now a question for Gurjit. Someone said, "I want to first become a nurse and then a doctor. Is that a viable option, and what should I look out for?" So I don't know if you can like answer this because I know you're just kind of starting out as a nurse, but yeah, I don't know, Gurjit, do you have anything to say that?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm actually a registered nurse, but my husband is actually a doctor. So he is a resident in his family practice, or he's doing family medicine, and he's just in his last couple of months here finishing up. So I can try to say a little bit about it. I have a couple friends as well who also took that route. It's a good idea in the sense as in it kind of gives you that job security, as in just in case you do change your mind or you don't get into medicine right away, because it's not the easiest, as we all know, to get into medical school at this point. So it's always something nice to lie back on, to have nursing under your belt, because you can always start working as a nurse part-time if you needed to, or if you wanted to, especially if you have bills to pay or you just need some sort of income. But the one thing I would like to say about that is nursing can sometimes be a harder degree to keep your GPA up with, just because it's so, it's like medicine. It's always, there's just a lot coming at your way, and they don't expect you to be an A+ student because you're always going to be learning, especially in the medical field. So that's the one thing, just because medical school is so competitive, everything coming along your way gets really competitive. It can sometimes be hard to keep that, like they try to keep a 4.0 or at least the 3.7 or 3.8 in your GPA. And that can get a little bit challenging in nursing. So then if you don't have that, it can be a little bit harder to apply into medicine, would be my only suggestion with that. But it's always nice if you, on the other hand, it's nice if you do a bachelor's in nursing, because then it does make it a little bit easier with your clinical portion once you're going to residency, or just because you've already been in that space, you've kind of been in that clinical setting, obviously as a different, in a different role, but it makes it a little bit easier with that transition. You've already had those anatomy courses. Yes, you learn a lot more in medical school, a lot more knowledge comes along your way. We're kind of just building up your base from the start there.
Yeah, no, that's a really good answer. Thank you so much. And now a question for Jacqui. A student was wondering, does your job ever get boring or repetitive?
No, I think it's what you make it. So I think it's for me, it's always very exciting, even 25 years later, because especially where we work, we get to meet people from all over the world. And so I think that keeps it very exciting and very interesting. But I think also, it would be boring if you just sort of did the same thing all the time and just sort of did a basic routine. But I think in anyone in healthcare, I think you're always learning all the time. There's always something more you can learn and something new. And sometimes I'm learning from my patients, and sometimes I'm learning from other chiropractors or other physios or other, healthcare professionals. There's always something more you can learn and something new you can do. And so I think it's up to you to keep it exciting, but I wouldn't say that ever gets boring.
Yeah, no, I can see how kind of the social kind of talking to patients aspect would keep it very exciting. And now a question. We'll ask this to Blair and Gurjit, both of you guys. Someone was wondering, how quickly were you able to find jobs at hospitals or clinics? Like, what does kind of the job hiring process or prospects look like? So Blair, if you want to answer that first.
Sure. Well, I was lucky enough that I was kind of already working part-time for the service that eventually hired me. That is a really important thing to look into, is what is the job market like for whatever you want to do. And when we have career fairs, it's more often the parents that ask about the practical things, like how much money do you make and stuff like that. But, that's really going to affect your life too. So you have to look into that. At SAIT, at least, we can't offer programs unless people get jobs afterward. So having said that, very typically what happens in many of the programs where people graduate from us is they graduate and they find part-time jobs. And then, eventually over a period of time, those become more concrete and full-time. Yeah, I don't know if that's sort of the same in all aspects of healthcare.
No, yeah, that's a really good look at kind of what SAIT does, especially. Gurjit, I don't know, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. So with nursing, it's also kind of similar with that as well. There's always a need for nurses everywhere and all the time. You kind of just have to look into the job field. But I kind of got lucky on that same space as in with nursing in your 4-year degree. It depends on usually what school you go to as well. With Mount Royal, you've got a really good program where they really try to get you in clinical base just within starting in your first year. And so once you do that, you kind of go on to different floors. You do a whole bunch of practicums every single year. You kind of find a space of what you like and what you don't like and what type of nursing you want to do. I know same with the UFC program with nursing. They also, closer to the end of the program, it's basically called like a final focus type of practical. So with that just means it's like a full-time nursing you're doing as a student. And so with that, my only suggestion would be to kind of make sure you choose your you get to choose this final practicum and just kind of choose it in a place somewhere where you kind of want to work, somewhere you kind of see yourself wanting to be there, because for managers and for nurses, on units, they kind of want to, they've already trained you to the unit as a student. That training, the process to get you as an RN is not very hard for them, just because they don't have to pay extra dollars to train you, because you already know the unit. You've been there for a couple months at least. So for myself, I was on a medical unit at the PLC, and that's currently where I work as well. Just because after you finish that final practicum, you just have to write your NCLEX and you can get hired right onto that unit. And I actually got hired right as a grad nurse. So a grad nurse basically just means you're an RN, but you haven't wrote your board exam. So you haven't wrote your NCLEX Canadian exam to get your license, but you're still finished your bachelor's degree. So that would be my suggestion, to at least try to kind of put yourself there. But there's lots of places in nursing. So for some people, it kind of depends on the job field. They say, it's hard to find a job as a nurse. Sometimes you kind of have to go a little out. It's a little bit harder to get into public health because those jobs get a little bit more filled up, or the turnover rates are a little bit lower. But then for myself, I did work as an undergraduate nurse too. So looking into any job opportunities for anyone that wants to become a nurse out there, you can practice as a student nurse and undergraduate nurse within your third. For Mount Royal, it's after your third year you can start working. At UFC, it might be you just have to have a certain amount of clinical hours completed. So then once you start getting that under the belt, and if you get into, for ourselves, it's Alberta Health Services. So once you get into Alberta Health Services once, you're able to see all these job opportunities. And since you're already in the program, you're already in the process, they're able to hire you a lot easier within all of Alberta Health Services in the city.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, that's a really kind of good look at what it looks like to kind of go through the hiring process as a nurse. So very good answer. And now we'll have a question for Peter. And a student asked what the fastest route is to become a doctor. So I don't know if there is a fastest route, but if there is, I guess, what is it?
Yeah, I love the efficiency of the question. I'll talk about international medical schools in a second, but for a typical Canadian medical student, it would be very unusual to be admitted to a medical school without at least a 4-year undergraduate degree, typically in a science background, like we've been talking about in the chat, but can be other things. And most medical students, more than half these days, would also have an advanced degree, like a master's or a PhD. So 4 years plus or minus another 2 or 3 years, and then medical school, Calgary and McMaster are 3-year programs, but you go all through the summer, no summers off. The other medical schools in Canada are 4-year programs. So it's about the same number of instructional days, it's just jigged a little differently. And when you graduate with your MDE degree, that's basically a license to do more schooling in the form of a residency. A family medicine residency can be 2 years plus 1 or 2 others if you want to do a special area of family medicine, like looking after geriatric patients or emerge. Or if you want to do a specialty, it would typically be 5 years. And then after a specialty, if you want to do something subspecialized, so to get hired at a hospital in Calgary, typically you would also need a fellowship, a little extra specialty in an area of your main specialty. So for example, you're an orthopedic surgeon, but you're particularly specialized in trauma, for example, and that's another 2 years. So to do it the quickest possible way would be to just have the undergraduate degree, go to a 3-year medical school and do a family medicine residency. That's the most efficient way, but it might not fit with your other goals. So just kind of have to be prepared for a little bit of a long haul, just like Gurjit or Jacqui or Blair would say in their area too.
Yeah, no, that's kind of a good look at it. And definitely it kind of seems like any way you take it, it's not a super fast kind of process. So yeah. A question for Jacqui, kind of along the same lines is someone asked, do you need an undergraduate degree to become a chiropractor?
I'm not sure exactly now what you need. When I was going to school, you did not need an undergraduate degree. You needed at least a minimum of 2 years of sciences, and I can't remember all the other courses that you had to have, but there's a certain amount of courses you had to have to be able to apply. I applied to chiropractic after 2 years and got in, and then I decided not to go. I wanted to finish my bachelor degree, and I was really glad that I did that, because I felt like it just gave me a lot more life experience and academic experience. And so I think you have to have a minimum of 3 years. And I'm not sure if you have to have a degree or not. So I'm not sure the current regulations there, but I would say, I think that it's worth having an undergraduate degree beforehand. It just gives you a lot more of a base, and there's a lot more experience you can get before that I think makes a big difference once you're in chiropractic school.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point to kind of have that undergrad degree, just kind of before you move on. Yeah, no, it's a really good answer. The next question for Blair, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this because it's quite a specific question, but a student asked, can I still be hired as a primary care paramedic without having my Class 4 license? So I don't know if you can kind of speak to what a Class 4 license is or what a primary care paramedic is. But yeah, if you know the answer to that question, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so in Alberta, we have kind of, it's, probably a bit too complex, but we have actually four kind of tiers of paramedic. There's emergency medical responder, which is kind of like a very advanced first aid course. Primary care paramedic is about an 8-month course at SAIT. Advanced care paramedic is an additional 2 years on top of the primary care paramedic, and then critical care paramedic is specialized training over and above that. And those people are usually ones who are doing air medical transports and working for STARS and things like that. So to the point of your question, it's the Class 4 license is the license you need to drive an ambulance, and same license you need to drive a taxi, actually. Only we get to go faster and make a lot of noise. But generally speaking, it's hard to imagine a place hiring you where you wouldn't need to do some driving. Now, a friend of mine works shifts at the Amazon warehouse. He's a paramedic. He's there all night, for headaches or chest pain or whatever. So he doesn't go anywhere. Does he need a Class 4 license to work there? Probably not. But most services would not, that's a rarity. And probably even the people who hired him asked him to tick that box. Do you have a Class 4 license? So if you have further questions about that, if for some reason you don't think you could get that, then, feel free to send me a note to clarify.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's kind of interesting kind of how much variance there is just within kind of being a paramedic. And then the next question that we have is a question for Peter. And a student asked, I really like this question, what should you do if you don't get accepted into medical school? So I know a lot of people kind of have this idea of going to medical school, and obviously it doesn't work out. So yeah, I don't know, do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, so if anything you try doesn't work out and you really want to do it, try again. So applying for med school is competitive, and sometimes it's hard to understand why one person got in and another person didn't. So if you have reasonable grades and you've taken the MCAT and done well, and you have good life experience and you're passionate about it, don't accept no for an answer the first time. Feel free to try again. I have a good friend that I went to high school with who's a physician. She applied to med school 5 times. So she was persistent, and good for her. And she did lots of other interesting things along the way. She did some really great research and contributed to scientific knowledge in other ways. And that was just her passion. And now she's doing it. She's totally happy. But I would go back to what I said earlier. If you're really, really focused just on doing medicine, you run the risk of missing out on some of the other great careers and other interesting things that you could see along the way. So I would say think broadly and follow your interests.
That's really good advice. Thank you so much. This next question we'll give to both Gurjit and Blair. And someone just was wondering, what does a day in your life look like? And they were kind of just like wondering about like the work-life balance. So yeah, are you able to kind of pursue other things outside of your work? So maybe Gurjit, we'll ask you first.
Sure, that's a great question. I was like, and people are always curious about, whoa, you're a nurse and you have to work, like you're always working or you're on 12-hour shifts and stuff. But I think it depends. So with nursing, you have a lot of choice. You have a lot of, you don't have to work so much and you don't have to work so little. It all depends. So there's always casual positions, there's permanent positions, temp lines, and all these kind of things. And so a day-to-day, it would kind of be different for every single nurse. Kind of depending on what unit they're working at, where they're working, the type of work they're doing. And so with my public health career, it's different because it's more of like an 8 to 5, or it's more of it's less evenings, less weekends. So with that, you do see a lot of like, you can do a lot more family life or a lot of things on your weekend, a lot of time off and stuff. With acute care, with being in the hospital, it can be a little bit more busier. It depends. The unit that I'm working on right now, we have 8-hour shifts. So with 8-hour shifts, I find that everyone has different preferences. For myself, I kind of like working 8-hour shifts just because it gives you the rest of your day. But then that also means if you're trying to work as a full-time nurse, you do have to work 5 8-hour days to get in full hours. And some people rather not, and they like to do the 12 hours just because if you're already there for 8 hours, you have the same patient load. Like you already know everything about your patients, might as well do 4 more hours, and then they can do 4 on and get 4 off. So it's not terrible. And the thing is with nursing, there's so much choice. So if you don't want to like work full time, if you don't need to work full time, you can always work less. You can pick up a line that has a lower point. We can, like with one of my lines right now, I work 2 on, get 3 off, you work 2 to 3 on and get 2 to 3 off at all times. And with that, you especially with working with COVID response, as in COVID is not going anywhere and it's been long 2 years. So then it's just like, it's good because you also want to not get too burned out and still come to work with your full energy and make sure you give to your patients completely. So day to day, it's not terrible. It's like, it is shift work. So 7 to 3, well, this is nurses in Alberta, 7 to 3, 3 to 11 is an evening shift. And then it's 11 to 7 in the morning is a night shift. And then if you're doing a 12-hour shift, it's 7 to 7 and 7 to 7 evening to night. And so it's not hard. 12-hour shifts can take a little bit more of your day. You might come home a little bit more tired just because you can have a busier day. You have given a lot to your patients, but then you also get that reward of having 4 full days off. And so it's not horrible for extracurriculars.
Yeah, no, very interesting answer. And Blair, I don't know if it's kind of similar with shifts or how does it work for being a paramedic?
Yeah, I won't add too much. Gurjit answered that really, really well. I think, one of the great benefits of working shift work, and it's not all fun for sure, is that you can go skiing on a Tuesday. You can go to Costco on a Wednesday when nobody else is there. You can go see a movie matinee in the middle of the week. So, I mean, that's kind of nice. And, if you wanted to work, say, part-time or not quite full-time, 36 hours a week, if you're working 12-hour shifts, that's 3 shifts a week. Now, 12-hour shifts, 3 in a row, are very, very long, especially if they're night shifts. But, some people, you can definitely, in a lot of these different medical careers, kind of mush around your life to sort of what suits you.
And just to kind of ask a follow-up question, like what does your average shift look like? Is it mostly kind of driving around? What does that look like?
Right now, paramedics in Alberta, without getting into it too much, are probably quite under-resourced. And so it is, they're constantly on the go. There's not enough long-term care beds in Alberta, which means our emergency rooms are always quite full, which means our ambulances are always busy and sometimes they're in emerge a lot. So a 12-hour, when I started, a 12-hour shift might mean, a couple of hours at the fire hall and then, not too much going on, and maybe we get a chance to read a book, and nothing like that now. You are working all, and I'm sure it's like that for almost any healthcare profession that works out of a hospital.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now a question for you, Jacqui. Someone was wondering, what is the most challenging part of your job?
Probably running a business. When you go into healthcare, you go in because you want to help people and you love treating people and working with people, and that's what your main schooling is all about, is learning to be a chiropractor. And then all of a sudden, generally most chiropractors tend to have their own businesses and be their own boss, but that means you have to learn how to run a business. That's definitely a little more challenging, and can also take up a little more of your energy and time than you want it to. Because for me personally, I love the chiropractic part, but I don't love the running a business quite as much. So that's probably the biggest challenge for me, I would say. Just I don't like having to put as much energy into the business part. I want to have all my energy towards treating patients and being focused on that.
And I think somebody asked this in the chat or the Q&A, but I think someone mentioned something about like if having a business degree is like needed or is helpful. Do you have any opinion on that?
I mean, a business degree, I'm sure, would be super helpful. I'm not sure if it's necessary to have a degree, but any business experience that you could have beforehand would be fantastic. I mean, we definitely had to learn it, as we went. So you make a lot of mistakes and you learn a lot as you go. And I think that's always going to be the case. But so I think certainly a business degree wouldn't be a bad thing to have, but I don't think it's necessary. Any, just going out and working for other businesses and learning a bit about business would be helpful. But taking a couple business classes wouldn't be a bad idea at all.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because yeah, you kind of don't really think about the other aspects like, yeah, running a business. I think we have time for just one more question. And so this last one we'll ask to Peter. And somebody asked, are there any expectations that you had about being a doctor that you found differ from reality in a bad or a good way? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think I knew that it was going to be hard work, but maybe I wasn't prepared for just how hard. So certainly medical school, pretty all-consuming activity, just like chiropractic school or others, I'm sure. So yeah, it was a lot of work, and residency was a lot of hard work. I was unprepared, as I think Gurjit mentioned, for just how great it was to be part of a team of people all going through the same thing together and working together. And that was an incredible experience, both as a student and as a resident. And even now, I love the people I work with. And I was not anticipating that I was going to, join a band of brothers and sisters who would have so many shared great experiences. So that was really great.
That's a really great answer. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to pass it off to Sandeep, and we're just going to go over kind of some last pieces of advice.
Okay, so now we just want to ask our panelists if they have any last pieces of advice for students like us. So we'll go in the order of Peter, Blair, Gurjit, and Jacqui. So Peter, would you like to share any last pieces of advice?
I think I just say what I said before. Do the things that interest you and that you're passionate about. Don't get funneled into something too narrow too early. I have a daughter who's in grade 12 who's going through a lot of the same things I'm sure many of the people on this call are, and it is a struggle because there's all this pressure to, pick something. Do what interests you. Do what you're passionate about, and bear in mind that there's a lot of things out there that could be really great careers that you just haven't seen yet, and so don't be too committed too early on.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Now we'll move on to Blair.
Hard to top Peter's answer. I believe in that absolutely. I would think once you're narrowing down things to things you might want to do, consider what you might want to do with the rest of your life in terms of, do you ever want to live in the Caribbean? Do you ever want to work in Europe? Maybe you don't, and that's totally fine. But it might affect some of the things you choose in your job early on. And I do always advise people, whatever they choose, to think about the longevity of the job and do you have a backup? I have a friend in LA who wanted to be an actor, and his backup job was photo processing. So nobody processes photos anymore. And like most people in LA, he does not have a job as an actor. So he, have a good backup. I mean, if you're going to be a physician or a nurse, or maybe even a paramedic, or a chiropractor, all of these professions, it's never going to go away. But yeah, just think about those things. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are some really good points. We'll move on to Gurjit.
So Blair and Peter, they've kind of summed it up right there. And so I would like to say exactly the same thing almost, that even with nursing or even just with career path, don't try to narrow it down so much. Just kind of have an open mind. Even as you go into nursing, yes, you're going to become a registered nurse, but there's so many different fields. There might be some things that you don't like. You might go in with a mentality, hey, I want to be a pediatric nurse, or hey, I want to work as a labor and delivery nurse. But like, your career might take you in other ways. There might be other things that interest you, a different type of nursing that kind of interests you. So kind of just have that open mind. Also get lots of experience in different places, just so you kind of find your niche, kind of find why you were becoming this nurse.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Jacqui, would you like to share your advice?
Sure. I agree with everything they just said. Probably the most important thing that we all have said is follow your passion and follow what gets you excited and what you're interested in. I think when you get into university, you start taking courses and you quickly realize which ones get you really excited, that you're really interested in. And then there's other courses that you're just kind of dragging through, trying to get by. And that's a good way to figure out where your passion lies and what you enjoy doing. And I think also just going out, volunteering, going and observing at different offices, and any life experience that you can get that again gives you feedback on what feels like something you'd want to do. I think that's a great way to just kind of figure out the direction you want to go, but you may change your mind a few times.
Thank you so much. So it looks like we're nearing the end of our time today. Thank you everyone for joining. And we really want to thank Peter, Blair, Gurjit, and Jacqui for taking the time to talk with us and helping us all better understand what it's like to have a career in health sciences and medicine. We would also like to thank our sponsors, MRU, SAIT, Blackline Safety, and Inception U for your support.
And I just want to remind everybody that this isn't the only webinar that we host. We host webinars every month. So definitely check out our website to kind of stay tuned to those. I think we have one coming up on January 18th that's going to be looking at careers in law and humanities. And then one in February that's focusing on engineering. So you can kind of, as I already mentioned, stay in tune to those on our website and also on our LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can also, this is a new thing, is check out our past webinars, which will be all on YouTube. So that's something we're really excited about.
Yeah, thank you everyone for signing up, and we really hope you have a great rest of your evening. There's also a post-webinar survey that we would really, really appreciate if you could just fill out for a second after the webinar. All right, goodbye everyone and have a great evening.